I want to welcome you today to the panel discussion on opportunities for regulatory convergence in cell and gene therapy. My name is Jessie Hanrahan, and I'm the Chief Regulatory Officer at AavantiBio. I'm delighted to be here today and be joined by such esteemed regulators representing FDA, EMA, and PMDA. Given that most gene therapies are targeted at rare diseases with small populations, the only way to justify investment and bring these treatments to patients in need is an efficient, similar, streamlined global regulatory process. As more cell and gene therapy products enter clinical trials and the marketplace around the world, the opportunities to learn from each other grows. In the next hour, we will discuss how regulatory convergence has worked and where there are areas for improvement. We hope to cover a lot of ground during this time. As each health authority is governed by different legal and regulatory bodies, the panel today will focus on convergence and not harmonization. Dr. Marks just did an excellent job setting up our panel, but I'll remind everyone that convergence is the gradual alignment over time across countries versus the implementation of uniform guidances. So reflecting the audience, our panel includes both in-person and virtual representation. Dr. Maruyama joins me on the stage from the Pharmaceuticals and Medical Device Agency, or PMDA, where he is a review director in the Office of Cellular and Tissue-Based Products. Dr. Maruyama is a Ph.D. scientist by training and has been at PMDA since 2008. So thank you for making the journey and joining me on stage. Dr. Celis joins us remotely today. He is the scientific administrator for the Committee for Advanced Therapies, or CAT. He joined the EMA in 1997 and holds a Ph.D. in pharmaceutical sciences. Dr. Marks also joins us remotely today and likely needs no introduction following his keynote address today. Dr. Marks is the director for the Center of Biologics and Evaluation Research at FDA. Detailed bios for all our panelists are available on the ARM website if you want to read more. So Dr. Celis, Maruyama, and Marks, I'd like to begin by asking you each to discuss your experience with the growth of cell and gene therapy applications and to provide an example of why it's important to focus on convergence. Dr. Celis, I'd like to begin with you.
Many thanks for the introduction, and I hope you can hear me okay. Now, let's start by saying that regulators have, in the meanwhile, a track record of over 10 years of approving cell and gene therapy products, and we know that many more are in the pipeline. So we're expecting a lot more market authorizations and approvals in the next years to come. Clear trends are there. It's majority of the products under clinical development are gene therapies. And secondly, more and more large pharmaceutical companies moved in the field of gene therapies. And this also explains the globalization of the field. Therefore, convergence and harmonization is certainly the goal for the next 5 to 10 years, and is already reflected in the fact that ICH have embraced gene therapies with the first guideline on non-clinical development being finalized. Another issue that I quickly want to raise here is the patient access issue, because it's not because a product is approved that therefore patients will have access. And here there are various factors playing, and it might be slightly more European orientated, but the fact of approval, meaning that the data, the clinical data generated, demonstrated a clear benefit risk, but that might not always be sufficient to demonstrate the cost-benefit decision, which is the basis for reimbursement. So failure of discussions with the reimbursement bodies has in Europe led to ATMPs being withdrawn from the market. So certainly one of the points that I want to raise to the developers is, if they consider marketing product in Europe, think about this second step after approval of the product, namely the interactions with the health technology assessment bodies and the reimbursement bodies. and that could have an impact in the protocol of your pivotal clinical trial that you are planning. So interactions globally are important, but also think about interactions with the downstream bodies that are responsible for reimbursement of these novel therapies and hence access to patients. And I stop here with my little introduction.
Thank you very much, Dr. Celis. And I think we all agree that access is a really important question as well. Dr. Maruyama, I'd like to ask you the same question that Dr. Celis just answered.
So for this cell and gene therapy area is very having good conversation with regulator, because we would like to avoid the gap between the regulators. So, like as Patrick said, that the product is now globally developed, and then so the Japan is maybe third applied country, first EU or US, and then come to the Japan. Maybe some reason is translation or something like that. But so after most case, after review the US and the EMA, then come to Japan. So that's why we sometimes need to learn or know that how they decided in the during the review time. That's very important for us. And actually, so now in Japan, 17 products already approved. So 8 products is a gene therapy, including 5 products for the CAR-T product. So the most case, so approved product is rapidly increasing now. So maybe it's a good time to the next step to convergence in the all stakeholders. That's my opinion, so thank you.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Marks, I know you already provided a few words on convergence, but do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with the growth of these applications and provide some examples of why it's important to focus on convergence?
Yeah, no, thanks. I would say that we've had enough sponsors, I can't name names, but where it's clear that as development went on and they realized that they had a very small market and that getting that product into another market outside of the United States was going to also be challenging as they had additional conversations, rather than just saying, oh, we're not going to go into the other market, they basically just decided to stop development. And that's really a shame for all concerned. And so it's not just one, it's multiple times that we've heard this now. It has to do with the fact you're dealing with oftentimes with small entities that we're hoping to be able to leverage what they did in one country to another, but again, the various what seemingly sometimes seems like trivial things to us as regulators end up creating a barrier to entry. And I think the really sad part about that is when that lack of convergence leads to discontinuation of development programs altogether, because then all the populations don't benefit of this. So this is one of those cases where I think the compelling case for this is, especially in relatively in these limited populations, and I think there are probably ways that we could hopefully agree as regulators that we could, cabin off, okay, populations of a certain size with a certain nature of disease, where we could hopefully come to an agreement that we could find a set of standards that we could all agree on, even though they might not be exactly the ones that I would have for a product here. At least we would be able to feel like, look, if we can compromise a bit here, everyone will benefit. Most importantly, those in need of those medical treatments.
Thank you very much, all, for your insights. For the rest of today's conversation, I'm going to focus questions on key areas of interest for cell and gene therapies. Firstly, expedited pathways are often utilized in this field. So I think we should start here. So Dr. Maruyama, Japan has a unique approach to conditional time-limited approval. Could you describe this process briefly? And also, what do you see as the benefits of this approach for cell and gene therapies?
Okay. So back to 2014, we changed the regulatory framework for the regenerative medical product. So Japan is very unique because we have a definition for regenerative medical product. It's different to the pharmaceutical or medical devices. This is the third category in the law. Then that law showed, that act, sorry, PMD Act, not the PMDA, okay? But PMD Act showed that only whole regenerative medical product is, can be granted for the conditional and the time-limited approval system. So that's not conditional approval system, conditional and time-limited. So once get the exploratory to clinical trial data, then the efficacy is likely predictable. Then once, this is a half of the way for the confirm the efficacy, but given to the approval. But sponsor must conduct the strict post-marketing surveillance to show, demonstrate the efficacy during the post-marketing phase. So time, granted time is maximum is 7 years. Then sponsor applied, I mean the remarketing authorization application submission to during that time, then review it. So if the efficacy is confirmed, then it's okay. But if not, that's authorization is will be expired. So that system, we so 4 products already approved for this conditional and time-limited approval system now in Japan. Then, but most cases little bit difficult to collecting data during the post-marketing phase. It's not good going to the as expected. That's a true story. So not easy pathway, okay? Early access scheme, but not easy. So that's why we worry. So my perspective, so if you interest this pathway, you have to conduct the, confirm the efficacy anyways. So this is, you know, the whole, you see good life cycle for the product, then you have to sure to planning to do how to confirm the efficacy. Yeah, it's a good and unique system, but yeah, something still difficult is there. So, yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Dr. Marks, as we are all well aware, the registration path for rare disease can often be very difficult. Layering in the unique challenges that come with gene therapy can often lead to protracted approval path for very promising medicines for patients in order to get to patients in need. How does your agency exercise regulatory flexibility in expediting these important and promising medicines? I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, but are there instances where the approval path may change at the agency's discretion in order to fulfill an unmet need?
Yeah, so I think it's important to us that we have a certain standard that we have products meet, whether that be our accelerated approval standard, that something meets the bar for on a surrogate or intermediate endpoint, or that it meets a traditional approval standard. I think you've seen that we potentially can be flexible on use, and we intend to use more flexibility moving forward too, on the use of traditional versus accelerated approval, knowing that sometimes, you know, in general, if we can give something a traditional approval because it meets the standard, we will, because that's easier and it ultimately costs the system less, without needing to go for confirmatory trials. But if we have to, and I think increasingly we may want to give accelerated approvals based on surrogate endpoints to allow us to get products to people more rapidly. So we do have a fair amount of discretion in terms of which of these paths we use, and also you know, how we think about what those surrogates should be, again, provided we believe that they will correlate ultimately with clinical benefit. I think the issue there is that they have to be reasonably likely to predict, and as long as we can feel like we're doing that, I think that makes a lot of sense. One of our issues is just to make sure that we do have some standard here, because we don't want to get into a situation where we are approving gene therapies by accelerated or traditional approval, and then have payers not want to reimburse for them. That would be not a good thing. So the idea here is to maintain our standard, which has flexibility inherently built into it, and hopefully get more products across to be available for patients.
Great. I'm sure all the sponsors in the audience enjoyed hearing that more flexibility may be applied in the future as well. So I do think accelerated approval is a very interesting potential path for cell and gene therapies, and we can definitely see changes at the agency. Dr. Celis, the Oncology Center of Excellence within FDA started a pilot project in 2019 called Project Orbis. It provides participating companies with a framework for concurrent submissions and review of marketing applications among several international regulators. If FDA were to pilot a similar project for cell and gene therapies, would EMA have interest in participating?
Short answer is yes. So if this project is any scientifically based collaboration with their clear objectives, and that is defined from the beginning, that should be okay to consider collaboration. Now, perhaps I can also add something on the question you asked to Dr. Marks, just on the experience with accelerated approvals for gene therapies. In Europe, we also have most of the gene therapies approved via conditional marketing authorization, and this means that the approval is based on data before the full clinical trial is done, or at least on basis of a data package where additional post-authorization studies are needed. I think here we're struggling exactly with the same problem that Dr. Marks mentioned, is that the downstream payers have some question marks on regards to why is the data really solid enough for this product to gain a place on the market when it comes to reimbursement. So we're also challenged quite often by the fact that we as a regulator would approve a product via accelerated pathways, whereas the payer bodies are perhaps still a little bit more conservative with regards to these new products, and put then question marks towards the validity of the data package. So that I just want to say that that is a challenge, seemingly not only in Europe, but also in the US.
Yeah, definitely agree. It's interesting too how the concept of what's required of a gene therapy post-approval came up in all of your answers as well, with the time-limited approval in Japan, accelerated approval, and also conditional approval. So I think it's also an interesting thing to think about the kinds of studies that will need to be conducted post-marketing and how they can be aligned and converged across regions to support what's needed, not only for regulators, but also for payers. So I wanted to move the discussion to regulations and guidances, which folks in regulatory enjoy. It may sound a little dry to you, but hopefully we'll make this interesting as well. So Dr. Marks, the FDA recently issued a draft guidance document on voluntary consensus standards recognition, and it's a program specifically for regenerative medicine therapies. And in the guidance, it describes that the scientific and manufacturing novelty of many regenerative medicine products presents unique challenges for meeting regulatory requirements, such as product testing and product characterization. Can you share the basics on how this program works and provide an example of how having recognized standards in these areas may assist sponsors and the agency? Sorry, were you able to hear that, Dr. Marks?
You just got, I was able to hear it once you saw my universal "I can't hear you" sign. So I did not hear throughout the past minute. I think both the EU and US were mutually disconnected from you. Sorry.
All right, no worries. We're all used to this virtual world, right? Who hasn't left themselves on mute in Zoom and talked for 5 minutes? So FDA recently issued a draft guidance document on the voluntary consensus standards recognition program. And I was wondering if you could share the basics of how that program works and provide an example of how it can be advantageous to have such standards.
You know, I probably just at a high level, just the idea here is to try to, again, have people be able to have something as a benchmark to work from, so that we can try to get more harmonization of things that are done when they're submitted to us, and that it will hopefully avoid some of the rework that happens when people don't have some reference to go to. So by being able to do this, hopefully, again, it will allow, again, facilitate development here. Somebody being able to do this, hopefully, again, rather than having to reinvent a process, we'll be able to look to a consensus standard and be able to essentially to work from that.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Celis, staying on this same theme, could a program similar to this program be used in other regions to assist in aligning expectations?
Let's put it this way, we don't have anything similar in Europe yet. We recognize automatically the standards set by Pharmacopoeia, ISO, and ICH. Of course, if another standard is applied by developers, and this is based on a scientific justification, then that would be certainly acceptable for European side.
And Dr. Maruyama, how does your agency look at consensus standards, and do you accept those from other regions?
I think it's the same situation in the EU. We, ICH guideline or Pharmacopoeia or something like that. But for this program may be acceptable, but we ask to the rationale to how you choose this, like standard, or that's why that's a need to conversation with sponsor or developers and then regulators. Yeah.
Excellent. And Dr. Celis, the first draft ICH guideline specifically focused on gene therapy was adopted in June of 2021 on biodistribution. What did you learn through that process of developing the guideline that may assist in developing additional guidelines? And of course, the 5 steps required for creation of an ICH guideline do take time. Do you have thoughts on how that could potentially be streamlined?
Okay, for this question, I go back to the EU rapporteurs involved in this guideline development. The feedback I got from them is that they very much appreciated this and saw the additional value of this diverse group of experts from the regulatory authorities and the close interaction with industry in this guideline development. What they also said is that they felt it was relatively easy to find harmonized solutions. So what they said is that this might be an indication that the current thinking from all the regulators is not that far apart. Now, one caveat they made is that gene therapies are still relatively new of medicines. So they were advocating for keeping the guidelines relatively high level, general and overarching, so that they will stand the test of time and also that they can be implemented and are acceptable in the different jurisdictions. Now, with regards to timing, I don't think I can say a lot here. Cutting down the consultation process is, of course, also not something you want. Perhaps if you make high-level guidelines, you can gain a little bit time there, but I think as a general statement, harmonization at ICH level will take time, and this is not ATMP specific. Any ICH guideline takes quite a lot of time to be finalized.
Great, thank you for your thoughts. And Dr. Marks, in addition to convergence and common regulations, are there other efforts underway to help with global convergence in cell and gene therapy, including ensuring access to these products in other markets not covered by representatives on this panel?
Yeah, so really good question. I kind of alluded to this. I think if we are going to eventually see these products used in low and middle income countries, I think we need to start doing the work right now. In fact, we're late for helping their regulatory authorities get familiar with what we're talking about here. I think that we've had conversations with WHO. To be able to have a product used in your country is not the same thing as being able to have it studied in your country. You know, the oversight necessary for overseeing clinical investigation is much greater than for its use potentially. And so one needs to, I think, to do the essential things now, which is have regulators get familiar with these, and also then start to develop in the regionally, the surveillance systems that might be necessary, for instance, for gene therapy follow-up or cell therapy follow-up. And so a lot of preparing the field, so to speak, for this is going to be important. I think we want to continue to work with our global regulatory colleagues. I think the WHO has provided a good outlet for this, and to try to make that happen over time, and hopefully, again, because of there are probably opportunities as gene therapies are launched into high-income countries to see them ultimately move into middle-income countries, and hopefully with various, you can imagine various scenarios, hopefully see them move into those in need in low-income countries, either through the help of foundations or through other mechanisms.
Great, thank you very much. Dr. Maruyama, you've been at PMDA for more than a decade and have overseen every cell and gene therapy product that's been approved to date. Based on that experience, what recommendations would you have for other countries when creating new regulations for cell and gene therapies?
So in Japan, half of the product is domestic products. I would like to say not globally, just for the Japanese market. So that product is a little bit less data to compare to global products, because they don't have money or something like that. But so it's very difficult to to require the same level to asking the collecting data for. I mean, this is not the clinical things. I mean the CMC part too. So characterization sometimes to very not going well, like just identify the cell purification. Impurity, and then potential assay. But the potential assay is not so many collecting the data. And then especially we have that early access scheme. Developing phase is very shorter. That's why very not so many data is collecting before submitting the applications. So that's a very big problem. So so CMC is a final, it's a very difficult thing. So the to review for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So given that many cell and gene therapy products are focused on rare disease and limited data sets to exist to support clinical trial design and also approvals, real-world evidence has emerged as an area of great interest. So Dr. Marks, in recent months, sponsors have leveraged real-world data to support BLA submissions and approvals. With the recently released draft real-world evidence guidance documents by FDA, the standard set for data quality appears to be quite high. Given that many rare disease registries are unlikely to meet the data standards set forth, is there still a pathway for utilizing real-world evidence in support of registration? And how can sponsors and agencies support or partner with rare disease registries to help them meet these high data standards?
This is a really complex question that needs to be unpacked, and I'm going to try to unpack in a couple different ways. I mean, first of all, real-world evidence for demonstrating effectiveness of products still is somewhat in its, it's not quite, maybe it's not in its infancy, it's latency age, it's toddler. In general, we're best able to use it when there are very, very dramatic effects or reasonably dramatic effects on efficacy outcomes. The use, otherwise you need large populations, and that's not what you see. You know, we're talking generally here about small populations or smaller populations where unless you have a very significant effect, it can be difficult to use real-world evidence in that scenario. That's not to say it's impossible, but the larger the effect, the easier it is to use. Obviously, as you get to larger populations, it gets to be easier. So perhaps in the gene therapy world, you know, you can imagine in sickle cell hemophilia, it could be easier to use real-world evidence, if not for, it's not necessarily even for registration, but for fulfillment of a post-market requirement, for instance, if one gets an accelerated approval. On the other hand, real-world evidence could turn out to be very helpful as one develops the information necessary to conduct a clinical trial. Again, we are willing to say real-world data can be a lot of different things, and so one may need to collect baseline information on individuals from which you then look for change, and we're certainly open to that. It is, there are, as much as it's tempting to use real-world evidence as a panacea for a lot of different things, when done well, real-world evidence, use of real-world evidence, it can be quite arduous, and actually is not as inexpensive as it may seem. We are in, by the way, at our center, the real world evidence business for vaccines at the moment. And I can tell you it costs a pretty penny.
Thank you very much for answering the complex question. And I agree, many things that seem easy from the outset perhaps are not. The journey can be long. Dr. Celis, cell and gene therapy sponsors are being asked to follow patients out to 5 and even 15 years post-treatment. And such efforts will generate significant real-world data on the use of these products. Do you envision that such data could be utilized to support label expansions?
It's a very good question. Yeah, would mirror what Dr. Marks has said, is that this real-world data in regulatory submissions is still at this, I would still call it infancy. So we are in Europe exploring and using or allowing the use of real-world evidence for contextualization of the results of single-arm trials, and also in the post-authorization setting to demonstrate long-term safety and efficacy, but not yet at a stage that real-world evidence data could substitute for clinical trial data. But like I said, it's an evolving field, and certainly not excluded that in the near future they could be used to support label extensions. Now, coming back to the point on quality of the registries, because it will all depend on how good the registry is, whether or not we can more and more rely on real-world data. And that's why I think there's a need for an additional effort to engage with the registry holders so that we can increment the data quality. And in Europe, we have a little bit of experience with this. We have a scientific advice procedure called qualification that was used for the cell therapy module of EBMT registry. So I think here regulators also can play a role in improving the quality data coming out of registries by direct interactions with the registry holders.
Yeah, very good points. I think it's interesting that all of you have hit on the fact that even when we prospectively set out to collect real-world data in the post-approval setting, it may not be as robust as we anticipate, such as your example in Japan. When you add in countries beyond those that you represent today, how do we ensure that that data gets collected in a consistent way? And then how do we use it? So I guess we'll collect more data as time goes by there. And Dr. Maruyama, do you want to talk a little bit about how Japan is looking at real-world evidence and natural history data in terms of potential to support initial approvals and beyond for cell and gene therapies?
So Japan also well discussed how to use the real-world data or evidence. Then cell and gene therapy area is much better to use these real-world data. But I feel sometimes there is no registered in some disease. Mm-hmm. So that's why you have to collecting data during the development phase. So that means not really use for the real world data, just the same as external control like that. So sometimes the resource for the data is a problem for some kind of disease. Mm. Yeah. Sorry, that's
great. Yeah. Thank you all for your thoughts on real-world evidence. I'm sure it's a conversation that will continue for many years. The field of cell and gene therapy has exploded over the last 10 years, and this rapid exponential growth has required sponsors and regulators to adapt rapidly and has exposed challenges in areas for development. Dr. Maruyama, genetically modified organism applications are required for gene therapies in many regions, including Europe and Japan. And these applications can be complex and approval very lengthy, especially in Japan. Are there efforts underway to align applications or efforts relating to GMO applications?
Thank you for the asking. So this is a good topic for me because I should speak out for the how change the GMO regulation in Japan right now, because most of you know that so Japan regulation for the GMO is takes long time to review the environment risk assessment. Some papers had like 700 days to preparing, drafting, and then approval, but that's a legacy of the past. We know that the sponsor or developer have some criticism to regulate the GMO. That's why we changing the regulations or more easy or more obvious, you know. So since 2019, we prepared a consultation menu for the GMO regulation called Cartagena Act consultation. So if use this consultation, that review time is less than 6 months. That's for sure. And then, so we established a consultation, and then we allowed to the parallel applied to IND notification, and then GMO applications. It used to be before I start the clinical trial, needed to approved for GMO regulation, but now it's okay for the parallel or applied to the IND and then GMO regulations or something like that. So now very shorter. So that's why no worry about there is no barrier. I think there is nothing too different in another countries like EU or Japan, you know. That's why please, no worries. We are changing. So
submit GMO applications in Japan.
Yeah. But still something needed to, convergence for this area. That's everybody expecting now, I think. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great news for sponsors.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Dr. Marks, the audience today represents both cell and gene therapy development, and often much focus is put on gene therapy versus cell. Do you see a difference in the advancement of cell therapy development compared to gene? And are there areas within cell therapy that you feel are ripe for regulatory convergence?
Yeah, so thanks. It's a really great question. I think what we've seen is for cell-based gene therapies, the CAR T cells and the adenoviral vector gene therapies, the number of degrees of freedom are somewhat limited into, and people have managed to, although there are still a number of challenges to be addressed, people are working towards addressing those challenges, and I think we're on track to work towards solution. I think in the cell therapy space, it is a very wide open area because we have everything from stem cell therapies to stem cell therapy derivatives, exosomes, to cellular therapies that are integrated with devices, essentially, cells on scaffolds, to try to mimic organs even. So there's a very large breadth of products there. I think the ones that are, the ones that are easier to characterize are where you're dealing with one cell type that's being administered into one location. where you can have a reasonable definition of what kind of processing is being done to make that cell type that you're administering. I think that still, even there, we keep going round and round with the issue of needing potency reagents or characterization of what's being given. In other words, critical quality attributes for some of the cellular therapies are more challenging issues to address, but they have to be, because I think what we've seen for a number of the cellular therapies, even ones that are relatively simple, as I've said, or a single cell type that's being administered, or ostensibly a single cell type, if you don't understand what you are administering in terms of its characteristics, read potentially potency, if you change your manufacturing process, or sometimes even just with drift over time because of shifts that happen in manufacturing gradually, you can lose efficacy. And so I think that's the challenge in the area of the genetically modified cell-based therapies is, first of all, there's a lot of different products out there in this space. And second of all, there have been some real challenges in arriving at those critical quality attributes and potency assays.
Thank you very much. It sounds like we're keeping you on your toes between gene and cell therapy and all the differences and considerations. Dr. Celis.
Can I make an addition to what Dr. Marks just said? I think in order to go for convergence discussions, we need to have more products. I understand your question, but the fact that gene therapies are now into ICH is not because they are so interesting compared to cell therapies, but just that there are more products, more experience gained amongst the regulators. So you can start talking about common requirements. What we see in Europe, also in the US, is a few cases of pure cell therapies or tissue-based products, but not sufficient to build the knowledge database for going the next step of harmonization. So ask that question again in 5 years and perhaps the answer is different. But now I'm not so optimistic towards already thinking about conversions activities for the non-gene-based cell therapies.
Okay, great. Sounds like we have a date in 2027. Dr. Maruyama, does PMDA communicate regularly with other countries in the APAC region? And are there any initiatives underway to drive convergence there?
Yeah, so in the PMDA, we have an international division, has a Asian Training Center. So we welcome to come to the PMDA we provided to the program to the how to review the product. So that's the one thing. And then for the cell and gene therapy area, again, we are very good relationship to the other countries. So like Korea or Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, sometimes we have a bilateral meeting to know each other, how to go in this area. So that's a good relationship.
Okay. Excellent. Dr. Celis, what would be your best piece of advice to cell and gene therapy developers who want to develop their products multinationally?
Very relevant question. I think early interaction, and the smaller the population, the rarer the disease, the more important that is, because that will save time, money, but also the blood of the patient at the end. So I would say share any minutes or any interactions with other regulatory authorities, consider joint scientific advice, and I would say talk to the regulators and highlight perceived differences in requirements, because it's sometimes an interpretation, and I would say quite often an interpretation issue. Whereas if you bring two voices or two points together, you often come to a compromise situation that is suitable for regulators at both sides of the ocean. And that I was now only talking EMA, FDA, but the same for other regulators, of course.
And Dr. Celis, in those situations, like say a sponsor went to FDA and got advice and then went to you and got advice and they're totally different, does it help you in your process to see the FDA advice or, yeah?
Of course, and even without you knowing, FDA and EMA talk about products on review in both regions. So yeah. We have bilateral Adhoc discussions between agencies if that is helping one or the other regulatory authority to understand what data were submitted and why they were considered acceptable in one side. And yes, sharing information, but I would take it a bit more proactively and like a statement made prior is involving different authorities in early interaction meetings could be a way out of coming to situations where you have something written out that is apparently different. Because like I said, it's for this type of products, there is flexibility and understanding, and with two minds, things more than, or can achieve more than one.
Great. So Dr. Marks, along those same lines, can you tell us a little bit about how your communications with international regulators help inform potential areas that could benefit from convergence, and whether or not you feel there are additional ways that we need to undertake to make progress towards convergence, other than more products, which Dr. Celis.
Yeah, no, there are various clusters. So there are cluster meetings. We have various working groups with our regulatory partners in Europe. Sometimes they also involve Health Canada. They will involve Swissmedic. I think we could probably do, just acknowledging areas for improvement, we could probably and would do better to involve Japan more often. And that would help us bring in the Asian regulatory perspective more. But those cluster meetings are extremely helpful because sometimes they give us the first heads up about something that may be coming our way. They also allow us to work through some of the challenges that we sometimes come into with gene therapies. Just a specific example is, I know that as global regulators, we all came to struggle together with the issues related to the activity of factor VIII gene therapies and some of the challenges in understanding the factor assays that were being used in that setting. And that dialogue was really important. So I think probably enhancing that dialogue, having it going on an ongoing basis. It's going on, and so that's, I think, a good thing. Could we do a little better? I think we probably could.
Great, thank you. So the COVID pandemic over the last 2 years has had a drastic impact in our lives, including the world of biotechnology development, as sponsors and regulators work closely together to rapidly develop and improve new therapies. Dr. Celis, during the COVID public health emergency, the European Commission waived compliance with the GMO directives for vaccines and therapeutics to address the pandemic. What did you learn from that experience that may help streamline and move towards more convergence on environmental risk assessment requirements?
I think this is a complex issue because here this is not only the pharmaceutical legislation and the pharma authorities that have to be consulted. For COVID, indeed, there was this urgency for waiving some or restricting some of the consultation processes that are normally needed for gene therapy products, for the GMO aspects of gene therapy products. Now, what have we learned? Probably not so much from the COVID pandemic, but already before the COVID, we understood that GMO requirements can be a blocking aspect just by the time it needs for the consultation process. You have to understand that the GMO aspect and GMO legislation is there, written mainly for food-based products, where pharmaceuticals are also covered. So one of the action points taken, and that is not something of the European Medicines Agency, but of the European Commission, who is the one proposing new legislations for Europe, is to consider in the GMO aspects of medicinal products in the light of the ongoing revision of the pharmaceutical legislation. And there they will look at a process that is more, let's call it, fitted for purpose. So taking into account the specificities of medicinal products and then addressing one way or another the environmental risk aspects so that the environment is protected in the same way, but without the formal consultation process that is currently legally required. But of course, this is a lengthy process, a change of legislation, and the outcome is at present not known. So we have to wait what comes out and what will be the final conclusion. Okay. A lot has been done with what is possible within the existing framework. And at least for gene therapies in Europe, there have been interactions and agreements between the different authorities so that common application form and good practice documents have been developed, for example, for the in vivo gene therapies, so that's mainly the AAV-based ones, and for genetically modified cells, which very much facilitates the GMO compliance for clinical trials with gene therapies in Europe. So it facilitates and fastens the approval of the GMO aspects, the involvement of the GMO authorities.
Excellent. So we're standing in the way of the audience and lunch. I think we're basically out of time. But I wanted to do a quick lightning round with all of you. So given the time, 10 seconds or less. If you had unlimited money and resources, what would you pick as the next area of convergence? Dr. Maruyama?
So we, the MHW established a working group for the xenon humanized organ transplant products. So it's we are preparing the guideline this year. So.
Excellent. Dr. Marks?
Convergence on manufacturing requirements.
Dr. Celis?
I think there's some improvement work that can be done at the non-clinical data package needed for approval.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for your thoughtful insights today, and thank you for the audience for listening. I hope the discussion provided insights into the considerations surrounding regulatory convergence, and I hope you all have a wonderful lunch and afternoon, and thank you to the panelists again.